Moments from Grace Church of the Nazarene in Portage, Indiana. It's good to be with you today on Facebook or YouTube. Please let us know you're watching, would you? That we might know who's connecting, and appreciate your comments, sharing with others these devotional moments. We've been in Matthew's Gospel the last several weeks, making our way through chapter 13, 14. This coming Sunday will be in chapter 15, but I kind of just wanted to revisit the story from Sunday, 2 days ago, from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33, and then share some devotional moments as well as maybe a reminder or two from the morning message. If you haven't watched it yet, you can go to our Facebook or YouTube pages, Portage Grace Church of the Nazarene, the 13th of August, 2023. Well, here's Matthew's account of a very famous story, Jesus walking on the water, Matthew 14, verse 22. Immediately, first of three immediatelys in this story. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. The crowds were those who had just enjoyed his feeding 5,000 men plus women and children from 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they ate till they were satisfied. And then Jesus sends them home. After he dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. His original prayer time with the Father had been interrupted by the crowds who discovered where he was. And the setting, of course, at the beginning of the 14th chapter is the murder of John the Baptizer by King Herod and his new wife, Herodias. And Jesus is grieving, mourning, of course. This was his cousin. This was his ministry partner. This was the one who announced his coming to the crowds during those early years of renewal in the wilderness. After Jesus had dismissed the crowd, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. Important phrase in chapter 14, verse 24. But the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately, there's the second immediate. Immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped Jesus, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." One of my daily devotional routines is reading from the Upper Room Disciplines, which is from the General Board of Discipleship for the United Methodist Church. Many of us are familiar with the Upper Room, which is a monthly devotional from that organization. And this is an annual book. And this was this past Saturday's devotional from Matthew 14, 22 to 33. Sidestepping storms is one thing, the author says, but weathering them is another. Not every approaching storm can or even should be avoided. Far from the safety of the shore, they had left at Jesus' behest. The disciples are in a storm they could not avoid and did not predict, like most of our life's storms. They're way off course. When it looks like they'll not make it through the storm, Jesus walks up toward them, exhausted and afraid. The disciples' disorientation and doubt come through in distressing cries. They mistake Jesus for a ghost until his words comfort them. Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. Fear was reasonable. Jesus does not keep the disciples from the storm, but he does not leave them alone in it either. Faith rises when Jesus is present. Just as Jesus stepped into the storm with the disciples, we can count on Jesus to be with us through our difficulties, enabling us to face our fear with faith. Face our fear with faith. We're not able to control the storms of life, but neither do we need to get caught up in fearing them. Christ's presence empowers us to turn up the volume of our faith and turn down the volume of our fear. In this way, we imitate Jesus, as Peter does later in the text, by practicing being released from fear so that we begin to trust God in faith. And then the devotional closes with this prayer: Lord, when we go through stormy situations in life, help us to decenter our fear and center our faith on you. Amen. The 4 lessons from Sunday's sermon, I'll repeat those for us in closing. The first thing is Jesus draws near to those who are hurting. And we have in these days in the life of our church some people going through storms, terrible storms. First thing is Jesus draws near. The second thing is that he calls each of us to step out in faith like he did to Simon Peter. Simon may have been an impulsive character, of course, but his faith was bold whenever Jesus called him to follow. The third thing is, and you'll like this, sooner or later, every storm ends. You may be going through a difficult chapter in your life right now. The wind is against you, and it's been that way for a while. And you're weary, discouraged, lonely, afraid. I want to tell you again, the storm will not last forever. It will pass, and the sun will shine again. So don't give up. Don't give up. And then one more quick thought. Finally, sailors know that when a storm comes, the best thing to do is to find a safe harbor, a place where you can be protected and surrounded by strength. And I said Sunday morning, and I want to say this Tuesday morning, the people of God at Grace Church of the Nazarene are as safe a harbor as you will find. Here, among these people, you can rest and heal and be loved. Here, among God's people, you can get out of the wind for maybe just an hour, but long enough to remember that God is near. And Sunday morning, we closed the service by singing, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And then that great gospel song, it will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Life's trials will seem so small when we see Christ. One glimpse of his dear face, all sorrow will erase. So bravely run the race till we see Christ. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.